Hello again, this is Dr. Jimmy, and this should be the third part of Halloween Horror Nights 20 Years of Fear, my history of that event, which took place, of course, back in the year 2010. And when I left off at the end of part 2, I had just got to when the website for the event started to get hacked mysteriously by Legendary Truth, the collective. How intriguing. So, when we saw that, of course, we would click on that link, which took us to the Legendary Truth website, which now had been updated as well for the first time since 2008. And the first thing we noticed was somebody was missing. Yes, when it gave the personnel involved in running Legendary Truth, the senior staff, the most senior member of the staff was gone. Dr. Calvin Thorncastle, that rather tall, elegant African-American gentleman, sort of reminds me of Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus in the Matrix movies, or perhaps Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury in the Avenger films. Somewhere in between the two characters, wearing glasses, not an eye patch, and someone who's elegant and charming, but also clearly someone not to be effed with. Yes, that sort of fellow. And he was obviously someone who's pretty damn smart and knows all sorts of neat stuff. That's the sort of person Calvin Thorncastle came off as before. But he's not there anymore. No. And the previous secondary person in Legendary Truth was now bumped up to the top spot. His name was Dr. Richard Steerington. Nice looking fellow, rather affable gentleman, obviously a bright man also, Dr. Richard Steerington. We hadn't met him at the event before, so we weren't too sure who he was exactly, but we saw him there. He seemed to be a likeable chap. And where he had been in the second was now another strange fellow we had never seen before, rather ominous looking fellow, Dr. Gabriel Fell. Now, have you ever seen Doctor Who? I don't mean the current show, but the classic Doctor Who that started in 1963 and went all the way into the 1980s. You can get all kinds of DVDs and discs and see it on Netflix and all sorts of things, so it's not that difficult to do now. I specifically refer you to the shows that were aired in the early 1970s, when John Pertwee was the Doctor, the third Doctor, a rather dapper man of action, who wore a lot of velvet frocks and capes and things, and did Venusian karate. Yes, that was when the Doctor was more likely to actually physically take on an opponent and knock them on the floor and flip them over his shoulder and stuff, because he was a master of Venusian karate, even though he was very elegant. There was sort of a James Bondiness about him. He was working with UNIT, a British, actually it was the United Nations Intelligence Task Force that that was involved in dealing with extraterrestrial threats as their science advisor and officer. And he would drive around a really snappy little roadster, a yellow car called Bessie, and had different companions. Liz was his companion in the first series that featured the third Doctor, but then Jo Grant, a rather plucky blonde girl, came along in the next one, and that was the same season, around 1971, that a villain became the primary antagonist to the Doctor for a couple of years. Another Time Lord, a renegade from Gallifrey, this one known as the Master. Of course, if you've seen them more recently, you've seen other people play the Master, and even a lady plays the Master nowadays, Missy. But back then the Master was this evil fellow, all in black, with dark, shiny hair slicked back, and a little sinister, almost satanic goatee and a little beard. Yes, the sort of person when you see him, the moment you see him, it's either Satan taking human form, or it's a Bond villain or some other supervillain of some sort. You can tell just by looking. He is plotting world domination or some other sinister thing. You know there's evil afoot when you see someone who looks like that. And that's That was the feeling we got when we saw Gabriel Fell, because my God, it was a dead ringer for the Master back in the early 70s. Good God, who is this evil one? And the name Gabriel Fell, I mean, it has certain biblical connotations. We wondered about this fellow and we saw him on that listing. We wondered. But what happened to Dr. Thorncastle? Well, you could click around on the site and find out that back in 2008, when the last Legendary Truth had been active at Horror Nights, 2 years earlier at that time, Dr. Thorncastle had last been seen right at the conclusion of that event, just after the conclusion of the final night of the event, and when we discovered all that information about Mary Agana. He was seen loading that mysterious device that they had used to scan the collective operatives, the field operatives on Delancey Street one night. They took that device and loaded it in a panelled truck, and that he was last seen with some other people who apparently were renegades, or a splinter group that broke off from Legendary Truth, and they all got in this panelled truck. Some were on International Drive near Dick's Sporting Goods store. Yes, and they haven't been seen since. How mysterious. What happened? Something is afoot. There's something mysterious going on, some sort of shake-up behind the scenes at Legendary Truth. This was very ominous. What could this mean? So we would go back and check, looking for more updates. And oh my God, another update, and Richard Steerington is no longer running Legendary Truth now. Now Gabriel Fell is up there, and below him is a new person, a lady named Ignatia Himmel. And she's not quite as sinister looking as Gabriel Fell, but her name also has some serious biblical connotations, if you do know your Latin and your German. And, and you look at her and she's not exactly, well, she's formidable, let's just call her that. She's a rather severe and rather proper looking lady who looks like she takes no prisoners. And she's also apparently a high-powered attorney who has worked in the past with some interesting organizations, including some shady government operatives. I don't want to brook any thing here, but I have suspect that there's something that ties into a house there as well, if you get what I mean. Not really, I'm sorry. Shady and Brook suggests something a bit crazy. I should have said Shadow and Creek, which wouldn't fit the pun, so oh well, if you know what I mean. Don't want to cause any havoc. God, I'm sounding like Owen. Alright, enough of that nonsense. Anyway, Ms. Himmel was a very interesting looking woman, absolutely, and certainly someone who looks like she is not to be trifled with. That we got there. So these are the ones running LT now, both Dr. Fell and Ms. Himmel. So who are these people? Because we knew very little about them. And then we got notified, those of us who registered on Legend Truth website, that we should turn our attention away from the website and turn our attention to the Legendary Truth page on Facebook, because this would be a big paradigm shift. Now, everything that Legendary Truth would be happening in the summer would all be happening mainly on Facebook. Now, I didn't have a Facebook yet at that time. I still had a MySpace, although I hadn't done anything with it for months and months and months, because nobody did anything with MySpace anymore by the summer of 2010. It was pretty much dead, and it was going to be shortly after that. I think it still exists, but does anybody out there still have MySpace they really actually use? If you do, well, okay, but you talk to like 3 other people. So that's when I actually went on Facebook, because of Legendary Truth back in 2010. That's why I went on Facebook in the first place. So we started on Facebook, and we signed up onto the Legendary Truth Facebook page, and then we started, and that became the source of communications from the senior staff of Legendary Truth to us field, or rather, not really field operatives here, but operatives out online. And there was an interesting question-answer session where we got to try to find out what was going on. We discovered that Dr. Steerington had gone out on a lengthy ocean voyage, and he hadn't been heard from since. Eventually, it became known that he was believed to have been lost at sea oh dear, that's unfortunate. And we were all quite dubious. Exactly how did he get lost at sea? Did someone lose him? That's what we wondered, because it seemed to be something very strange about what was going on at that time. There was another fellow who kept posting on there, a man named Ryan Richards, and he was working, and he was very concerned about what Art and Design were doing with this lantern that they had shown on the website, and the photographs that kept popping out of the lantern. He was concerned about that, and eventually it turned out that he was so concerned that apparently he did something sinister, because it was reported to us then that he was last seen leaving the offices of Legendary Truth with a whole bunch of these photographs that he had gotten from Art and Design. Somebody had, from Art and Design, sent him some sort of package containing a number of the photographs that had come out of the lantern, and they had been altered terribly. And he took these pictures and he stole them from the Legendary Truth office. At least we think it was Ryan Richards. We're not certain, because it shows a picture and it looked like him, and this person gets up and leaves the building, and then we don't see him again. So apparently it was him leaving the building and making off with all of this important documents, and it was like, what happened? And Ms. Himmel told us to be on the lookout for this person and to report any contact we might get from him immediately. She was very concerned about these sort of activities. Well, we started to get contact, but not from Mr. Richards, from someone else entirely, who began to contact us on Facebook and through email. Her name, we don't know, to this day. But she's apparently, at that time, was working for Art and Design. And she apparently was the person who sent these photographs. They weren't just the pictures of things that were coming up, but all the archival photographs of past events. Somehow they'd been altered mysteriously, and she sent these to Richards apparently, and she kept some of these files for herself, and she began to contact us because she was very concerned that there was something really weird happening at Universal Art and Design that they needed to investigate, and she didn't trust the Legendary Truth people, because she was afraid that there was something nefarious going on back there, and so she wanted us to see what was happening. She calls herself Goth Wacky. Now, I've heard more recently that the name Goth Wacky was meant to be an inside joke, and it has some sort of relevance. I don't know if that's true, because the person who said this, I don't know what contact they have with anybody on Design. My own theory has been that someone behind the scenes is a Game of Thrones fan, or rather a fan of the books Game of Thrones is based on. The TV series hadn't started yet in 2010, but had been a fan of the franchise, the novels, you know, the Song of Ice and whatever the hell it is, the George R.R. Martin books, and I've never read them. But anyway, the tribe, the Dothraki, because Dothraki, Goth Wacky. It just seemed to me that that might be what's going on there. But anyway, she was a pretty red-headed girl who had a hat, a fedora like this, but blue. And she liked to bite on the brim. Because her Facebook picture shows her chewing on her hat. Yeah. Anyway, that was who we saw, Goth Wacky, and she began to send some of us pictures. And they were the photographs that had been originally in the archive site, pictures from years past. Like, for example, a picture from the Festival of the Dead Parade, or the Chainsaw Drill Team, or whatever. Little pictures from different events over the decades at Horror Nights. But there was something strange now. On the pictures there were some sort of dark, shadowy patterns. We couldn't quite make it out. Were they burnt? Was like some kind of superimposed dark shadows? And she told us not to show them to anybody, and definitely not to give them the Legendary Truth. Well, of course, we started sharing them with each other. What do these mean? And eventually, as different people, and I got one too, for example, and well, I didn't want to post it publicly. Some people posted it publicly on Facebook because Goth Wacky said not to. So I gave it to somebody else, and she posted it publicly. But anyway, all these pictures got put up, and some people began to realize that if you put the pictures together, some of the markings seem to form a larger picture. You know? And of course, Ignatia Himmel was like, if anyone has seen or contacted God, tell us right away. And if you don't tell us right away, well then, you know. And she was like very irate about that. And there was also, you know, and although Goth Wacky did not want us to mess with those pictures, don't try to put them together because something terrible could happen. Ms. Himmel seemed very interested in us putting those pictures together to see what they made. And so we started to do that. There was one gentleman in particular. His name is Rob. He's had many names. He's known as Rob Cage, Rob Rage. I think one of those is his wrestling name because he has been a professional wrestler in the past. He's also known as Rob Light, Rob Lightbringer, also known as Heimdall, also known as Postmodern Rob, as he was known back in the old days on the Vault. Or, not postmodern, post-human Rob. Different altogether. Post-human Rob. Also known as the Eye of Horus, sometimes known as the Steampunk Detective during the events of Legendary Truth in 2008 because of his boots, his steampunk boots he would wear, and his mohawk and his goggles while he was doing his detective work and uncovering some of the clues for that event, doing a good job on that. So he's been known by many weird names over the years. He also has a porn name, but I won't tell you what that is. But he won't mind me revealing that. I hope he won't mind me revealing that because he's coming back to Florida, and he's you know, was a wrestler, so he's like, you know, big. But he's a good dear friend of mine. In fact, he tells people in Hollywood that I'm his father. He's working in a shop at Universal there, and someone comes in and he mentions being from Florida and says, "Oh, do you know Dr. Jimmy?" "Yeah, he's my dad." So I let people believe that because I thought it was funny. The odds of that happening are 1,000,000,000 to none. But anyway, Rob started putting the pictures together. He's the one who actually got every last piece together and formed this strange pattern. All these weird patterns in a sort of circular spiral form, including a symbol like a circle symbol, one that was like a book, one that was like a blade, all of these together, 5 different patterns within this circular device, sort of. Now, when this was done, the people at Legendary Truth apparently used that as a model to build an actual metallic version of this same intricate pattern. It was called the Portametas, and they put this inside the lantern. And when this happened, there was a major supernatural event. Yes, because Legendary Truth had acquired the lantern from A&D at this point. A major supernatural event, and emerging from the lantern itself was an entity of enormous power and evil. A demon, an ancient demon, ancient Sumerian demon. If you know your Ghostbusters, you always know Gozer's Sumerian demon. This one is named Adaru, but he is the living incarnation of fear. Yes, fear itself emerged from the lantern and became the icon for Halloween Horror Nights 2010. Literally, we released fear from the lantern. At least we got blamed for it, and as recently as last year, Ignatia Himmel, making her first actual physical appearance at the event, blamed those of us playing Legendary Truth last year. It was our fault for letting fear out of the lantern. But we only put the pieces together and made the design for the Portametas. We didn't actually build the frickin' thing out of metal and put it inside the lantern. That's on you. Well, maybe not Himmel herself, but whoever working under her did that amongst the staff of Legendary Truth. The people, whatever technician actually built it and put it physically in the lantern. None of us did that, so you can't blame us. And if you must blame us, blame Rob. I shouldn't tease Rob because he is coming back. Or I think he's coming back. Or visiting or something. Alright, we'll see. But I can talk about that. He made a video announcement the other day. So he made the video, and even though he made it on He made it on Friday, and people think, oh yeah, April Fool's. No, he actually is coming back. So I wouldn't blame us because they actually put the portamatos in the lantern. But that's how the icon Fear was established. And when that happened, of course, immediately the website changed again and became the full updated website, and it revealed all the haunted houses and scare zones. So now we knew what they were going to be. And we had this scary thing on the front of the website, all black with big, pointy, nasty, snarly teeth. Snap, snap, chomp, chomp. That was Fear's teeth. Fear needs to see a dentist. Maybe he's afraid of the dentist. All right, but I guess we'll have to go on then towards what happens next after Idari was revealed. No, yes, the 5 icons were also apparently somehow connected to him. He had sent them, each one of those symbols in the portamatos was one of the icons. And it turns out we just didn't realize it, but Jack the Clown was a living avatar of chaos. And the caretaker was the incarnation of death, and the director of sacrifice, the storyteller of legend, and the usher of vengeance. And they're all apparently somehow connected to Fear, and by putting their symbols together, these 5 were in fact the minions of Fear himself, and they brought Fear into being through this magical ritual involving their symbols. Apparently Fear was behind Horror Nights from the beginning, from 1991's Fright Nights all the way through, and that he was using all these cycles of fear to build power until after the 20th cycle in the year 2010 he could literally manifest and take over the event. Okay, that's the idea behind Fear. And I'll continue then with the actual houses of the event and the event itself, beginning in part 4.